Hey, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another installment of the NTC podcast. This is episode 134. Aaron Washington, your host here. Glad to be back with you all on another installment of NTC. This evening, I have the great pleasure of having Kelly Iko join the pod here. He is a regional reporter for The Athletic and covers the Houston Rockets in depth all season long for The Athletic, has a lot of great coverage on them. If you guys are on the website, if you're a Rockets fan, I highly encourage you to check out his work. He does a lot of great coverage for that team. So really glad to have you on, Kelly. We've been kind of talking about getting this going, man. So it's really just glad to have you on, and glad to get this going, make it happen. And I hope the season's been treating you well, man. Glad to have you on.
Yeah, and as you know, the season can be a grind, and it typically kind of hits you around this like late March, early April, that little window right before the playoffs. But can't complain. This is the best job in the world covering the NBA, as you know. And this season has given us so many different avenues to explore. Obviously, with the CBA changing and the TV deal coming in, and how that's going to affect all 30 teams. And then on my side, just seeing how these teams try to move in this space that's ever changing every day. I think this season has been really interesting from that aspect alone. So it's been a pleasure to cover it for sure.
Absolutely, man. Well, I'm glad to hear that. So we're going to jump right into the subject of our pod today, which is going to be the Western Conference. Right. Towards the top of the West, Kelly, I mean, you've been watching this like a hawk, I'm sure, with all the different scenarios that could be played out for the Rockets.
Right.
Heading here, closing out the regular season. I mean, they're jockeying for second place with three different teams right now. The Lakers are right there. The Nuggets are there. The Grizzlies are there. They've all kind of alternated between winning streaks and losing streaks. So, man, this last stretch of 15 or so games is going to be really exciting to see who kind of solidifies those 2 through 4 spots there in the Western Conference. So we're going to go one by one, hit these 4 teans. Don't worry, man. We are going to get to the Rockets here. Your bread and butter here, so we're gonna get to them a little bit later. But to start off this podcast, I want to look at the Denver Nuggets here on this pod, man. So I mean, this is a team that we've known has been formidable for several years now. 2023 NBA champions. They're currently 4th in the Western Conference at a record of 44-27. They're a formidable team, man. There's no doubt about that. They have Jokic, the 3-time MVP. Wrestling for a possible 4th MVP, which is just blowing my mind. That's just really insane. We're just doing it again. Just wild stuff, man. And we know their starting lineup is the real deal. Jamal Murray, Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter Jr. I mean, those guys form a really great 5. And I mean, they're 4th in the West, but man, they're right there battling for 2nd, 3rd place with the other teams we're going to talk about. So my first question when I really think about the Denver Nuggets, Kelly, is, man, do they have enough depth to really make a run at another championship?
I think the problem with Denver this year, and maybe it's a bit different than the year they won the title, when you had the depth in terms of Reggie Jackson, Jeff Green, even Bones Highland. You look at guys like Bruce Brown. They had a number of key names that were able to, even though some of them were 3D, guys that were plug and play, they had enough healthy bodies to throw at teams on a nightly basis that when you sprinkle in, Jamal Murray's, his actions, and then you have the Joker and the greatness that he is, it was able to be by and large head and shoulders above the rest of the competition on a night-to-night basis. Now, what you have is a kind of a depleted roster in terms of the overall pizzazz of names, and you have guys like Julian Strawther, Jim Pickett, Zeke Naji, guys who are, good NBA players, but in terms of trying to make a run, I don't think it's enough. And that's kind of the reason why he's had such a great case for MVP this season, is because he's had to use this roster, which is less than stellar. And he's been having to deal with injuries. He had to deal with, Jamal Murray trying to find himself again after injury. And he's been able to have this sustained level of excellence in terms of just the way he impacts the game on both sides now, and just you seeing how much of a talent he is. I don't think when the playoffs come, I don't think that they're going to have enough spark, enough juice to get past the second round, get to conference finals. But, for the time being, given what they've had to endure this season and the loss that they've had in the offseason, it should be considered a success to get to this point, even though I think they're going to win at least 50 games, which is going to be a win for them.
Yep.
And the problem with Denver is that I don't think the bench has enough shooting in terms of high volume, like
Mhm.
to sustain them in a playoff series. And
Right.
that's why I think they'll get caught out.
I mean, you look at what they have in Westbrook, for example. I mean, this is pretty much their best player that's not starting right now. Their best
Right.
bench player. He's been great this season. I mean, it amazes me that he's 36 and he is still stuffing the stat sheet every night. I mean, this is classic Westbrook stuff that we've seen for a lot of years now. And he kind of calls into question the shooting, like you were just talking about with the bench there. He is not a guy that defenses are going to honor from night to night, especially when you get in a playoff scenario. If you're having him out there with another non-shooter, it really kind of complicates things from an offensive perspective. Now, there are ways to get around that. He's been great playing with Jokic. I think those two make a really great pairing. Just looking at the way that Westbrook gets downhill, loves to cut, loves to kind of catch the defense lacking if they sag off of him, kind of getting backdoor looks, getting fast break looks. He's still great at all that stuff, just hustling for the ball, getting boards. He's a positive player still. There's no doubt about that. But in a playoff scenario, you're looking for guys that can really give you the kind of spark you were talking about,
Right.
create easy baskets, take some pressure off of Jokic and Murray. That's where the questions kind of come in as far as his play goes. So no, I think that's a great point for sure. We're gonna have to.
And I think the thing about Russ, to your point, and we've seen this in the past, is that because his game is so deemed on power and force and athleticism, and in his previous stops in LA, the reason why those times weren't as successful as they are now is because he was asked to do a number of things that he wasn't comfortable with, right? They asked him to spot up in the corner at times and kind of
Mhm.
wait his turn, trying to play behind LeBron, and that's something that comes with it. But now in Denver, you're seeing him kind of fit with players that are similar to him in the way he thinks the game, in terms of
Mhm.
quick, aggressive, fast making decisions. The issue with that was that come playoff time, he's been in the playoffs long enough to know that teams are going to sag off him, in the half court. He's going to have to make maybe 3 or 4 threes a game to keep defenses honest. And I think he's shooting around 35% this year from three, which is for him, that's pretty good. That's better than average for
Okay.
him.
Yeah.
But you know, in the playoffs, and this, the game slows down, defenses shrink. You're going to see a lot more zone. And if he's not able to consistently beat them on threes, even though he's a smart cutter, he can be in the dunker. There are ways to get him involved in the half court that can keep the team efficient offensively. But the playoffs is a different game, and I don't think Russ in a vacuum is enough of an X factor to give them the edge in the series over, say, a Golden State or even a Minnesota or something like that.
Right. That's shooting in the bench. I think those are all huge issues for sure. I think another question mark that I have when it comes to the Nuggets is their ability to get stops on a consistent
Yeah,
basis. Looking at their defensive rating this season, man, I mean, it's not great. I mean, they're in the bottom third of the league. They're 22nd right now in defensive
yeah,
rating. Historically, when you look at title contenders, you're going to be top 10 in both offensive and
both ends,
defensive
yep,
rating.
all year long.
Yep. I mean, those are hallmarks of a champion right there. You look at what the Boston Celtics have on those ends of the floor, and the Thunder and the Cavaliers. The Nuggets just don't have that kind of balance from night to night that you would expect a title team to have. So, from that perspective, I don't think they have what it takes to consistently buckle down when it's time to get a stop, when it's time to lock in and stop some of those top threats from around the NBA. I just don't think it's going to happen. What I will say, though, a positive for Denver this season, man, with the departure of KCP, man, I mean, they really needed Christian
He
Brown to
stepped
step
up in
up
a big way. Yeah,
big way, man. I've been very impressed by what he's brought to the table. 15 points per game this season, 5 boards, shooting 38, almost 39% on threes. From the field, he's at 57. Effective field goal percentage is 62.5. He's
right.
been super efficient. Another guy that can do a little bit of everything when it comes to just like, hey, he's a guy that just kind of fits the mold of like, hey, what does the team need from me tonight? Is it
Right.
to be a defensive guy, take on one of the tough defensive assignments on the perimeter? Do I need to play off of Jokic? Do I need to hit some spot up threes? Whatever the situation calls for, he's been up to the challenge. So I will say that he's kind of like that X factor for them in a way. Like if Christian
Right.
really hooping like that next to the others, I mean that raises the bar for sure when it comes to like what Denver can do on a night-to-night basis.
And I think, had it not been for what Cade is doing in Detroit, I think Christian was going to be, a pretty strong favorite for most improved.
100%.
And I say that understanding that, typically when we look at these awards, most improved typically comes down to, people look at the stat sheet and seeing who had a year-over-year increase, in the biggest margin.
Right.
The thing about Christian Braun's game is that when you look at his usage, everything he's doing is the exact same he did last season in terms of how he's used on the court and the half court. It's not like he went from a 16% usage rate to like a 22, and this is the end result. No, this is the same guy that's been there since he was drafted. He's an excellent shooter, a tenacious defender. He's smart with the ball in his hands. He's a perfect. If you were to craft, role players around Nikola Jokic, Christian Braun is going to be one of those guys because he's going to be willing to take on the toughest assignment and not complain about it. And he's going to give you 110% effort every time he's on the floor. So I think his emergence this season is a big reason why Denver was able to stomach some of those losses in the offseason. Now, the playoffs is going to be the biggest test of seeing how much his growth has actually helped them, because I think a few weeks ago, the Phoenix game where he was able to show up late in the fourth quarter in overtime, that kind of showed you what kind of player he can be when the lights are brightest. Now I want to see, it's been 2 years since Denver, 3 years since they won the title. What does Christian Braun's game look like game 1, 2025, first round? That's going to be the king for me.
Yeah, he's had his moments in the playoffs before, but his role was different. He was a bench guy back then. They still had KCP, but now
the spotlight wasn't on him as much. Yeah,
exactly. Yep. So it's a totally different ball game for him, for sure. One other guy I wanted to talk about when it comes to the Nuggets this season, it honestly does give them a chance to win a playoff series if he's playing like this consistently. Jamal Murray, it's fascinating. You look at how he starts seasons; it's totally different from how he ends the season. I went on Basketball Reference and I split it up from the first 32 games he played to the most recent 29 games he played. In the first 32, he was at about 19 points a game. He was only about 43% from the field, 37% from three. So, I mean, he was inefficient. He just kind of a little bit unsure of himself.
Yeah, he was floating through those games. Like when you watch him, he was just like in and out. Yeah,
exactly. But you look at the last 29, and by the way, they're 19-10 in those 29 games. Yeah. He's at 24 points per game at about 51% from the field and 42% from three. So, I mean, those are two totally different seasons. And this happens every year. He gets to the second half and he just takes off. So if Jamal is playing like that, you got Jokic. If Christian's up to the task, I mean, hey, who knows? I wouldn't call them a favorite by any means, but you got to give them a chance in the series as long as they don't burn out from not having that kind of depth next to them that they had in the past.
Right. And Jamal has always been, that big game type of player in terms of how he shows up in those big time moments. And go back to what you said, if you look at, even if you even increase that to his production since the All-Star break, he's shooting almost 50% from three.
Yeah, crazy.
On high volume.
Yeah.
This is a guy that has been there before in those moments. He's done that. It's taken him some time to come back from injury because that's never an easy thing for these guys to go through. But if he's shown that he can be a dependable number two guy, when his number is called. And I think the good thing about Jamal is that the way he approaches the game, especially the way he approaches downhill scenarios, he's able to get in and out of his breaks like a receiver in terms of he's just quick. He makes a cut, makes a decision, and he goes. And I think that really helps Mike Malone in terms of how he can structure placing guys like Christian and having cutters like Russ. And even if you want to bring in the backup like Zignagi, there are ways that Denver can construct these games where even if their roster has maybe 6 or 7 guys, because of their core is so elite and so talented, you should trust them, in the series. Now, am I saying they're going to be favorites? No, I think the West is as tough as ever, and I think it's going to be an uphill battle for them, regardless of where they finish in the season standings. But it's pretty hard to count them out, just because of what they've done and because of the cachet that Jamal Murray has built in this league as long as it's been here. So I think anytime you have those two guys, and you have an X factor in Christian Braun, you have to give a little bit of trust in Jamal and Mike Malone and Jokic. Like, this is a dangerous team. No matter what you said, the more I talk about it, the more I'm almost talking myself into putting them in the second round. Because of they're such an elite team in terms of when they need to most. The defense is slacked off for sure, but I think Jamal, we've seen him at times be an aggressive point of attack defender. I'm not saying he's going to be an all NBA guy by any means. I'm not saying he's going to be, a lockdown, point guard, but you just need to win 4 games in the series to advance, 4 in advance. And they have enough, to get them, 4 games. Now, I'm not sure how long that lasts, but I think to your point, Jamal has really turned around the second half of the year, and it's going to give them some juice.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're gonna have to keep an eye on them, man. They could be one of those guys that one of those teams that kind of sneak up and do some damage for sure. So we're looking at the second team here during our podcast, and this is your bread and butter right here, man. We're gonna get into the Houston Rockets for our second team, and man, they've been rolling the past several games now. They just took out the Heat last night, which hurt me a little bit. You see the jersey behind me. It's kind of hard to stomach. But man, Van Vliet 37 points. Amin Thompson's back, 7 steals. He had a great performance, 18 points, 9 boards, 5 assists. I mean, you look at this team right here, man, and from last season, especially 2 seasons ago, from where they were to where they are now, an incredible rise. 46 wins. They're currently second in the West, although that's kind of gone back and forth the past few weeks. Yeah. And man, this team, the job that Ime Udoka has done with this team, especially on the defensive end, just continues to impress me. Obviously having Amin Thompson there, having Tari Eason there, Van Vliet. I mean, all those guys just love to get after it on defense. And when you got guys like that, they can lead the charge, really propping up everybody, kind of showing that, hey, here's how you really get after it. You give a lot of effort. You don't take plays off. And you just give the other team just the hell of a time getting up and down the court. It's really fun to watch. So I mean that's kind of where I want to start with them is just, man, the defensive performance and Amin Thompson, how he kind of spearheads that effort, just flying around everywhere. And you've watched this team probably more than most, and I'm sure you've noticed just, man, how much of a talent Amin Thompson is. And it's crazy because as a guy that's about 6'5", and he kind of slides between the 2 and the 3. You would expect a guy like that to be a reasonable shooter. I mean, he knows what he does best, and that's not shooting. He doesn't shoot a whole lot of threes at all. He just gets downhill. He gets in transition. He makes plays for others. He plays defense. I mean, what more can you say? He's a great teammate, a great guy to have on the court. So, man, talk about a little bit about their defense and Amin Thompson, man. He's been super impressive so far.
So, Ime is never going to win Coach of the Year because, when you look at it from a statistical standpoint, between this year and last year, they won 41 games last season, and they're probably going to win anywhere between, 50 to maybe 53, 54. I don't think it's enough to win Coach of the Year, but I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a coach in the league that's had a bigger impact on this team than Ime has done with Houston, specifically because of how he's respected, the importance of defense. And I think when you look at just the roster, right, and the names you go down the list, Amin Thompson, Dillon Brooks, Jabari Smith, Tari Eason, Fred VanVleet, these are guys that understand that defense is going to be the bedrock of anything they do. And if they're going to be an irritant in your side on a nightly basis, so be it. You take a guy like Amin Thompson, right? He came in the league, and the biggest thing about him was that he couldn't shoot, right? They were told that it was going to be hard for him to develop a jumper. His mechanics were wonky. It was too stiff, too upright, yada, yada, yada. What he's done since becoming a Houston Rocket and playing under Ime, it's hard to find guys like that, 6'7", 6'6", whatever you want to call it, that can jump out the gym, that are able to switch 1 through 5, that are able to play with such downhill force that it's almost impossible, or it's pretty tough to stop. Now, what Amen is able to do defensively in terms of just have his hands all around the court. He had 7 steals last night, and it looked like he had 15 just because of his activity is tremendous. The motor is nonstop, and that energy is infectious. You look at Dylan Brooks, even though from a number standpoint, his impact might not be as felt as much as it is. You know, if you look at the raw on-off numbers and stuff like that, clearing the glass, we'll tell you a different story. But just their collective activity as a whole is what makes them good, because they're greater than some of their parts.
Right.
And I think Tari Eason, you know, who's a passing lane nightmare in terms of how much deflections he gets. Jabari, who's able to clean up behind him. They have a pretty aggressive, cohesive system going for them. And I think a lot of it wouldn't be possible if Ime didn't come in and instill that level of discipline and order. But most importantly, it wouldn't have been possible if Alperen Sengun didn't take the lead that he has defensively. You know, being that background defense, the rim protector, and just the anchor of what they're able to do. And you look at guys like Jalen, you look at guys like Jason Tate, Steven Adams now, who they're bringing in and playing those double big lineups. Like, there's so many different things that they've been able to do defensively. And I think even though offensively they're inconsistent, because they're able to defend at a high level that consistently, I think that will give them a bigger chance than anything, you know, once the playoffs start.
I'm glad you brought that up, Kelly. The offense of this team that could be a little inconsistent. Right. Obviously, the defense is it can be a championship level defense. The third in defensive rating this season. You just highlighted all the best parts about what they do on that end of the court. When it comes to the other side of the ball, however, they are average. They're about 15th in offensive rating. And I mean, they got guys that can explode. Jalen Green can go out there and get you 30 any given night. We know that. You talked about how Sengun just comes out there and can give you a ton of production on that end. But when it comes to, as a unit, getting enough points on the board, having that kind of explosion that you need sometimes when things get bogged down, you need an easy basket. That's where some of my questions come in about the postseason. We know about Amen Thompson's shooting struggles. We know that Jabari Smith is not going to be the most dynamic offensive player, although he does a lot for the team defensively. There's just some certain questions about that. Jalen Green could be a little bit up and down. He can have some questionable shot selections sometimes. You know, he hasn't been the featured guy in a playoff setting before, even though he's averaging 21 points a game. I just wonder how that's going to play out when he is the leading scorer for this team. And he's never been in a role like this to where it's like, hey, you know, you're looking for somebody to carry you in games that that mean a lot, to where the defense is keyed in on you, really good defenses. So I'm curious to see how that kind of plays out in the postseason. You know, how Van Vliet fares offensively, how Jalen Green fares, how Sengun fares. I mean, these guys haven't been in that scenario before. So this is going to be completely new to them. And they're going to be learning on the fly, getting like on the job experience. For sure. So, you know, how do you feel about how their offense could play out once they get to the postseason?
I think they're gonna learn some pretty hard lessons next month, and it's not as a slight to them. It's just the reality of the way the game is played. When you have a team like the Rockets, who, for all intents and purposes, struggle in the half court consistently, this is due to, you know, not having, and to their credit, since the break, I think they're 10th in 3-point percentage, but they still don't take nearly as enough threes. I think they're 22nd in threes attempted per game. They don't shoot enough threes. They don't have a offensive system that tailors to one guy. Like, there's no real pecking order. I think Ime has really preached that equal opportunity to offense, which is great for the regular season, but come the playoffs, that you might run into some problems because, like you said, these are guys who are going to be experiencing this for the first time. There's going to be a natural ego that kicks in, you know, because they feel like they've arrived and they have, to their credit, because they deserve this in terms of where they came from. But you also run the risk of running into offensive issues, right? If you rely so much of your game on controlling the offensive glass and creating extra possessions and beating teams in transition, that's great. You're going to play a number of veteran teams that not only have studied you intensively and know how to effectively counter some of your go-tos. They're going to put you in predicaments where you're forced to learn in real time, right? Like these guys have never been in a playoff game before, a lot of them. And to their credit, Fred VanVleet's there and his experience is going to help tremendously. Dylan Brooks has been there. Steven Adams has been there. Jeff Green has been there. But teams are going to key in on them. And we've seen at times zone can hurt this team. We've seen at times talented perimeter isolation scorers can hurt this team in the half court. They're going to be put in positions where, as an offense, if you're not firing on all cylinders, if you're not hitting 12 to 14 threes a game, and if you're not taking care of the basketball, you can run into issues. And I think this is a young team, so they're going to be excited to get to the playoffs, and they should be, coming from what they used to be accustomed to. But
Right.
you won't learn until you actually go through it. And I think they're going to have to go through some of these games, and you might have to lose a heartbreaking game 7 in the first round to understand, that you might need to tweak some things heading to next season in terms of X's and O's, player personnel, and the like.
For sure. Yeah, those are great points. That's essentially kind of like where my mind went when it comes to like a postseason scenario for them.
Right.
You look at the Thunder last season and like how much talent they have, and they still ran into a wall there in the second round, and they had to learn some tough lessons. Even though they were first in the West last year, and they still had some struggles there. So for the Rockets, I think they've already kind of exceeded expectations in a lot of ways and
For sure.
better than a lot of people expected, myself included. So just getting to the postseason, regardless of what seed they are, 2, 3, 4, I think it's a successful season if they can push whoever they play at least to a 6 or 7 game series. And even if they bow out, hey, I mean, this is a great learning experience. I do think at some point you're going to need to kind of figure out, okay, who is that alpha guy? Who's that number one that can carry you night to night, game to game in a postseason scenario and kind of solidify that. But like you said, for the time being, it's working for them. They're getting wins. So right now, no need to tinker with that and kind of mess with that dynamic. I think they're all playing well together and they're all on the same page. I think one player I'm curious about kind of moving forward, it reminds me of another guy on a team that's now exploding, having a great season. Jabari Smith Jr. is a guy that's missed some time with an injury this season. It seems like he's kind of been up and down a little bit. It hasn't been the most consistent season for him. It reminds me of what we were starting to think about Evan Mobley kind of going back a season or two ago, to where it's like, oh, he was drafted in the top 5 and we expected him to be a star. And it seems like he's plateauing a little bit. And, we're not really seeing the juice. And all of a sudden this year he's an all-star and he's doing great things. So I kind of want to ask you about what you've seen from Jabari. I mean, do you think that this is a year to where, hey, he just kind of settles into a role as a defensive guy and then the offense comes later? Like, what are your thoughts on him?
I think it's hard anytime you have a young player like Jabari that's never come off the bench his entire career of playing basketball, and then you first come to a team and then you're trying to be the glue guy, on a team that's equal opportunity. So, there are 4 other guys that are pretty aggressive in terms of their shot selection, and you kind of find your niche there as that 5th option. But you break your hand, you're out of the rotation for a number of weeks. Amen Thompson comes in and catches fire. Now you're coming back to the situation. Now you've been demoted to the bench. And I've always thought that in theory, bringing Jabari off the bench would help him, because it should allow him to be his most aggressive self in terms of, usage rating and just his positioning in the half court. You can put him in top of the key, put him in the slot, you put him in the elbow, the dunker spot, wherever, because he has that unique, quirky kind of face-up game. It's still developing, but when you watch him, you see, the potential, if this thing can be fleshed out a bit more. The problem with it is that when you're in a situation like this where so much is asked of you defensively and you don't really know where your shots are going to come from, especially when the playoffs come, there's going to be a hyper intense situation where everybody's going to be on eggshells because this is a young team getting there for the first time, and things might not go how they expect. So I think for Jabari, trying to find a balance has been the biggest key for him. And if you talk to him, he's a wonderful guy. He says all the right things. He's a team first guy. He's going to put them before himself. My only question is, at what point does he find the balance between coming off the bench and fully embracing that six-man role where you kind of have a green light, because this is a team where there is no real pecking order. So if you're hot, Ime has been known to go with the hot hand for the 2 years he's been here. So I've seen Jabari win a game before at Torreson. I've seen him hit a buzzer beater to win the game, and I've seen him shoot 39% from three on 5 to 6 threes a game. I've seen him be that high-level rebounder. It's just when you have a team like the Rockets do where there's no real hierarchy, it's hard to find your niche. You kind of have to go with the flow. You have to go with the flow, and you have to be adaptable, because Ime has been known to do different things at different times in terms of how he approaches games. So I think one of their biggest strengths and one of Jabari's biggest attributes is the ability to play small ball center. And I think the good thing that Ime has going for him is that not only is he able to have games where you have the double big lineup of Steven Adams and Alperen Sengun, you also have where you can go small, put Jabari at center, put Amen Thompson at the 4 or the 3, and put Dillon there. And you can able to play with the kind of pace that those young guys crave. So I think Jabari, and to some degree Cam Whitmore as well, I think they have the ability to be – you have some X factors on the team in terms of how you can set up your offense. It's just the issue that's been holding them back all year is their execution. And that goes back to, play calling and, kind of trying to update the software on the playbook. I think that's kind of been outdated to some degree. And that's adversely affected some of those guys in terms of rotation, rhythm, and just overall offensive efficiency.
For sure. Yeah, great points on Houston. I think they're incredibly fun to watch, especially when it comes to the defensive end of the ball. Man, I mean, there's just some guys that take it to a new level, and it's refreshing to see in an offensive-driven league, guys that will get after it. So, yeah, I 100% agree, and I think they have even more potential to explore still with a lot of these guys being so young. And it's going to get even better after this playoff appearance, regardless of if it's a first round out, a second round out. They're going to learn a lot about themselves and what they need to do to go forward to really become a true contender in the Western Conference. So, no, I love that team and everything they have going on. So, really exciting stuff from them. So, number 3 here, man, we're going to look at the Lakers for our next team. Man, what a season. What a season it's been for these guys. They've gone through pretty much every scenario you can think of. Having LeBron in there and AD, losing AD, bringing in Luka, LeBron going down, Luka leading the charge. I mean, they've seen it all over the past several months. So right now they're in a situation where they're also one of those teams trying to get number 2. I mean, they're third right now at 43-26. LeBron has been out for 6 straight games. Luka has stepped in. He missed the last game, but he should be back tonight. That's what I'm hearing. He's averaging 30, 10, and 8 since LeBron went down. So, I mean, this is a guy that, I mean, we know what Luka does. He's one of the favorite players in the league. There's no doubt about that. But what's a little bit new about this Lakers team is that there is another player next to LeBron and Luka that's just torching the Nets right now. Austin Reeves has been fantastic all season long. Personally, for me, Kelly, I didn't think that Austin had another gear to reach, but obviously I was wrong. He's a guy that went from like a good, solid starting guard in the league to like, man, this is all-star level production that he's giving you every night. He is almost 20 points a game now, 4 boards, 6 assists, great efficiency. Last 5 games have been really solid. He's been at 28 points against the Bucks, 37 against the Nuggets,
Yeah.
28 against Phoenix, 30 against the Spurs, and then most recently against Denver again, 22 points. So he's become a reliable offensive guy for them. And I think the two areas in which Austin has gotten even better is that handle specifically. And
Yep.
man, just like, I mean, I would say just like overall as a shot creator, just being a lot more solid. He's a guy that can get a shot off against almost anybody now. He can really
Yeah.
take advantage of mismatches on the perimeter. And he loves to operate on the second side of the ball when the ball is
Right.
swung and the guy's he's attacking a closeout. He's really effective there. So now he has a career high usage of 25%. He has the
Yeah.
ball in his hands a lot, regardless of if he's playing with LeBron, Luka, or neither of them. He can go out and get you a bucket. He's just been fantastic, man. So I wanted to give him a shout out, and he's a
Yeah.
major reason why the Lakers are second, third in the West, really kind of climbing the standings this season. They've been awesome.
So I think it's important to note when you have players like a LeBron, like a Luka Doncic that command so much attention on a night-to-night basis, that you have guys like Austin Reeves who can not only take pressure off of those heliocentric players, but are able to create offense of their own. I think so for
Right.
so long, we've as an NBA community, we've gotten so accustomed to seeing LeBron surrounded with 3-and-D guys that were catch and shoot options, hit the corner three and give the ball back to LeBron. Or same with Luka in Dallas. Now you have a guy in Reeves who can run offense on his own in terms of he can get Jackson Hayes in the pick and roll. He can get Rui Hachimura, in the corner for a three. He can go down himself and get fouled, get to the line, create offense for himself that almost allows the Lakers to stagger, LeBron, Luka, and Reeves because they're able to varying degrees run the show. And I think that's the biggest reason why the Lakers are my dark horse in the Western Conference, because of the fact that Reeves has taken on this mantle as the third guy. And maybe it took, AD leaving to kind of fully embrace that, on an every night basis. But man, Austin is just watching him. He's a tremendous talent. And it really, he's what I call he's a ceiling raiser, because you obviously have the floor in LeBron and Luka. You obviously know what you're going to get on any given night from those guys, but to have a true X factor in Reeves that can take a game, he can go win you a game 7 on his own. He can go get you a bucket in the fourth quarter or overtime because of how talented he's a real 3-level scorer. And like you said, he's a confident ball handler. A lot of times we see players that play with LeBron and Luka who are almost not afraid to handle the ball, but they're so dependent on those guys to create for them that they focus on other parts of the game. But Austin Reeves said, "Nah, give me the ball and get out the way. I can do it." Yeah. So I think to his credit, he is the biggest reason why I believe the Lakers will come out of the West, because Austin has shown to me and to the NBA that he is a trusted guy, he's a dependable option, and he is no quote unquote role player around those guys. He's his own man, and he's a star in his own right.
For sure. And that's the biggest difference about him. He doesn't need another guy like LeBron to set him up. He is confident, taking charge. And man, I mean, this is something that I don't think anybody saw coming. I mean, especially if you look back to like a couple years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like, hey, he's a solid guy. We could bring him off the bench, start him in a pinch, and that's who he is. But no, at this age, and I mean, I think it's important to point out, I mean, he's 26. It's not like this is a guy that's hitting his second, third year in the league or something like that. Right. I mean, usually when we see guys make a jump like this, it's usually like year 3 or 4, and they're 22, 23, hitting their stride. I mean, I didn't expect him to make a jump like this at 26, going on 27. It's unusual to see something like that. So, yeah, I mean, he's been fantastic for them, and I think it does give them a chance to come out the West, just because LeBron and Luka are not the end-all, be-all for them, especially for LeBron. I mean, every media outlet on earth has talked about his longevity, and rightfully so. Yeah. He's been around since the beginning of time. He's done everything and more. So I think at this juncture, having Luka in there, having Austin Reeves is going to help him a lot for sure. And I don't know if you've seen this meme, Kelly, but it's one of those like Pokemon graphs to where you
Yeah,
have the Charmander, the Charmeleon, and Charizard, and Luca's
yeah.
the big one, and then you got Reeves, and then you got Dalton Connect
Dalton,
at the
Dalton
bottom there.
Connect. Yeah.
Yep. So I wanted to highlight Dalton Connect, man, for a second because he's been great as well. He may be the first evolution of those Pokemon, but he's
Yeah.
had a great impact himself as a rookie there. And he's a little bit older, sure, but he's come in and been a sharpshooter for them. Now he is more of like that typical role player that you would see
Role
next to
player
LeBron
around those guys, right?
or yep, just be available as an outlet, shooting 36% from three, and he knows his role. He's not going to try to
Yeah.
do what Austin Reeves does and try to create. That's not his thing. It's like, hey, I'm going to be in the corner. I'm going to be on the wing. You drive and kick. I'll be available, and I'm going to knock it down. Effective field goal percentage, 57%. That puts him in the 75th percentile on cleaning the glass. Yeah. So he's filled his role really well. He's had a few games where he's actually popped off a little bit next to
Reeves. He's an efficient guy, and I think for Dalton, I'm pretty sure he had mixed feelings about the trade that fell through to Charlotte. Yeah. But in hindsight, this is probably the best place for him. Like if you would have gone to Charlotte, yeah, you would have gotten more playing time, you would have gotten your numbers, but you like in terms of your career, you might have gotten lost in the fray in terms of just another guy that got numbers on a bad team. The Lakers is probably the best place for you, as a developing guy, because you're going to get on the floor. You've shown, Redick, that you can be trusted in those moments, and this is a guy that shoots the ball well. Like in the playoffs, you need guys like that can hit 2 threes in the quarter to turn an 8-point deficit to 2, or someone that can create his own shot. He's a guy that people had question marks coming out of college, and I have no idea why, because he was older, but he was more seasoned. Like the Lakers don't need any more projects. This is a team that's already developed in place. They know what they want to do. They know what action they want to get to, and they know exactly the kind of roster that they want to have. So I think a guy like Dalton, who's an effective floor spacer, just gives more space for Luka and LeBron to dominate. And that's why I think, like, we haven't seen in recent NBA history, a team that is similar to their setup in terms of two guys in Luka and LeBron that are, 27, 7, and 7 guys on the floor at the same time. The closest we've seen to that, maybe the 6 and 7 win Rockets of Chris Paul and James, in terms of guys that you command their own show. Maybe that, but I think Dalton's, his value will come in the road playoff game. I think he's going to be a guy. You go check the box score. He's going to have 14 points on 3 for 6 from 3, and a couple of rebounds, a couple of steals. He's going to be a guy that's going to be an impact player.
Right. And these guys are obviously very talented, and they're gonna win some playoff games, no doubt. But when it comes to a true championship contender, you're going to need. We talked about that with the Nuggets. You're going to need those other guys to step up, make their presence known. So you look at who the other guys are. I mean, I think the Dorian Finney-Smith pickup for the Lakers was really solid. Bringing him in, I mean, he's a 3-and-D guy to a T, and you need guys like that, especially with around LeBron and Luka. So I mean, he's been great as far as just filling that role specifically. Jared Vanderbilt, man, the defense is going to give him no respect from 3, but man, he's everywhere. He flies around the court. He gets on the boards. He's going to pick up a KD. He's going to pick up a Devin Booker, whoever it is on the perimeter or a forward on the other end of the floor, and just like make it as difficult as possible for them to get into an action, use a screen, whatever. He's just a dog, man. And I love what he brings to the team in terms of just effort and just being that one of those like rough kind of power players that is a change of pace for them. So I do like what he's brought to the team. And another guy, I think he's directly benefited from Luka coming in. I think Jackson Hayes has been great since Luka came in. Just getting those easy lobs and those dump off passes. It looks like he's a little bit extra and invigorated and motivated playing with guys like that. Just getting his own. So I mean, the supporting cast is solid, no doubt. Is it going to be up to par playing the Thunder or something like that? We'll have to see about that. But I do think there are signs of a roster that can come around those other guys who talked about and be prolific enough to win playoff series. I mean, we haven't even talked about Hachimura yet, and he's been
Yeah,
out for
and
some time.
that's the real
I
dark
think,
horse. Yeah,
yeah,
I think like they have enough guys to hit threes in a series where the focus doesn't always have to be on LeBron and Luka. Like we've seen Dorian Finney-Smith rack off 5 threes in the game. We've seen Rui rack off 5 threes in the game. We've seen Reeves do that as well. We've seen Dalton connect. They have enough shooting to keep defenses honest. And anytime you have that, you combine that with Luka and LeBron. You have a guy in Jackson Hayes who's looked more energized since Luka arrived. He's a little more spry on both ends of the floor. He's running the channels. He's finishing lobs. He's crashing the glass. He's active around the restricted areas. So I think this is a team that I think they have enough. Now it's going to come down to obviously LeBron's health, and
it's a big one.
what that looks like. And it's good that he's missing games now because the Lakers probably are the one team in that mix that doesn't really care about seeding. They're going to be prepared for any matchup because they have Luka and LeBron. Yeah. But it's going to come down to how healthy is LeBron at 40. And how much does he have left in the tank realistically? Because this is going to be another grueling playoff campaign, and he's missed 6 games in a row.
Yeah,
I want to see how his body holds up. Once the postseason's here.
Yeah, I mean I think that's going to be probably for me the biggest question mark is are him and Luka going to hold up over 4 separate series if they go 7 games and this is a drawn out battle? We saw Luka in the last postseason. I mean, he was banged up and he was just non-existent on defense, and that really hurt Dallas a lot of times. So I'm just curious to see, how's the ankle going to hold up for Luka? How's LeBron going to hold up, coming back from that injury? The good thing is, though, like you said, it's happening now and not right into the playoffs.
Right.
And there are enough games left so that when LeBron does come back, you got a little bit of a one-way of like 10, 12, 15 games. He can get his legs back under him, get comfortable again, and then kind of ride it into the postseason. So I do think that's a positive for sure.
Yeah.
So one last team to end it out, man. We're going to look at the Memphis Grizzlies here. This is going to be the end of that quartet we're looking at. They're also in that mix for the 2nd seed. They've been a little bit down. They're just weird, man. I mean,
Memphis is
like they are weird, man. It's just like every time I look at them, it's like, okay, they won 5 in a row, or they lost 4 in a row. Like it's just like hard to get a read on like how good this team is. I mean, case in point, last night playing the Clippers, lost by 20, 128 to 108. Yeah, I mean, just all over the place. And this season, we talked a little bit about them on a recent pod. Their defense this season has been a little bit suspect, and that's definitely hurt them in terms of just trying to get wins here. They're still in the mix for 2nd. I mean, they're at 43 and 28, 5th in the West. Jaren Jackson is back after missing some games. It looks like he's going to be okay. He only missed 4 games. Man, I think the elephant in the room for this team, I mean, he hasn't been around a lot this season. They can win games without him in the regular season, but I don't think they have the ceiling in the postseason if he's not playing. I think Ja has to be available. You look at how many games he's played. I mean, the Grizzlies have played 71 games. He's only played in 43 of them, so he's missed almost 30 games. And this is nothing new for him. And I think the most troubling part about this when it comes to Ja is the fact that like every time he's injured, it's something different. So one time he'll miss 3 games with a shoulder. And then he'll miss another couple of games with an ankle injury. And then it'll be the knee. It's just like, there's always something going on with the Ja. So I'm really concerned about him being able to, because you get in the playoffs, it's like, hey, we need you for the long haul. We need you for every game.
Right.
In the regular season, he plays 2, 3, 4 games, 5, and then misses 3. It's a problem. So, I mean, if he's not playing, I mean, this team is formidable, no doubt. They have the depth, but I don't think they have the top end talent, even with Jaren Jackson, if Josh's not going to be available for them. So that's where my concern comes in. But how do you feel about them in that mix of the 4 teams you talked about and just being, top of the West?
It feels like when you look at Memphis, this feels like the last ride the last dance for this current iteration of this team. It feels like they know what their ceiling is. You know, if you want to attribute it to Taylor Jenkins, if you want to attribute it to the coaching staff or just the collection of talent they have, I don't think they have enough to get it done. Number one, going back to what you said about job availability, like depth has been their calling card all year. You know, at times we've seen Taylor run 13 guys in the game, and all those are serviceable NBA players. But when you can't consistently rely on your best players, it's hard to find a rhythm. And it's actually a miracle that they're still within striking distance of second in the West, because you look at their projected starting lineup, I guess their best lineup of Ja, Dez, Jalen Wells, Jaren Jackson, Zach Edey. That's their most used lineup. And I think they've played together maybe 190 minutes all year.
Wow.
And
crazy.
That lineup has been lethal because they're a plus 25 in that rating in those minutes. But they are never able to get on the floor together because of the ins and outs of the injuries, the inconsistencies. Bodies are piling up at one point. So I think when you look at what Taylor Jenkins wanted to instill this year, you wanted them to be fast, you wanted them to make quick decisions, you wanted them to shoot a bunch of threes. That's great. But if your best player, your most important player for your downhill actions, for your driving kick, for your gravity and Ja, if he's missing half the year, it forces other players to have to pick up the slack. And to his credit, like Jaren Jackson, he's had a tremendous year because of that. He's had to have to adapt. And that's going back to the growth that he had last season when Ja wasn't here. You know, you have guys like Jalen Wells that have come in as a rookie and handle that responsibility to an outstanding degree. You know, Desmond Bane took a while to get going in terms of his offensive consistency. He was dealing with the injuries of his own. The ankle was bothering him. He's come back from that. They're never able to get on the same page at the same time. And I think because the West is so stacked, you're kind of behind the eight ball in the sense of you're kind of fighting yourself just to be available, just to be healthy. And that's going to be an issue when you, like Houston, struggle in the half court, you know, at times to create good looks, and your guys are just never there. It's just hard. Like Ja, and this is why I keep coming back to the Ja thing. I don't know what his future looks like in Memphis, but I just get the sense that everything is riding on this playoff campaign coming up next month. And depending on how things go, you may see a very different Memphis team, you know, in the near future.
That's very possible, man. There's a lot to touch on there. I want to start with Jaren Jackson. In what kind of season he's had. I think he's been the best part about this season for Memphis. You know, just having a breakout season, you know, being up over 22 points a game, you know, still shooting 36.5% from three. You know, usage is up, being aggressive. He has that similar type of breakout offensively that I think we've seen over from Evan Mobley in Cleveland, just getting the ball, being in a face-up situation, and just taking the ball straight to the opponent, getting in their chest, you know, having great touch, finishing inside at a high rate, but also being able to hit that three ball when the situation calls for it. I think that's all been great for him, and he's really just kind of lifted Memphis. I mean, I think he's the biggest reason why they're still in striking distance, honestly, of second, like you just talked about. Having a guy like that, he's a huge floor raiser for them. So, I mean, he's been awesome for sure. The other thing I want to touch on is the rookies that you mentioned before, them being in that starting lineup. I mean, I think that says a lot about those two rookies, that they're in that lineup that has a plus 25 net rating. I mean, these are guys that are, you know, playing their first NBA games. Just really impressive stuff from them. You know, specifically being a second round pick, coming in and being a starter, being a high volume, a pretty good efficiency guy from three, and being able to pick up some pretty decent offensive threats on the other end of the court defensively has been just huge for them. And then Edey, of course, just being a solid guy in the middle, not super crazy numbers, but he's just solid.
Yeah.
Kind of reminds me of like what you would get from like a Zubac or a Pirtle from Toronto, just good sturdy guys in the middle that you can rely on every night. So I had some questions initially about how they might fare in the playoff setting, but then I thought about last season and what Derek Lively did for Dallas, and I kind of went the other way. I'm like, if not to say that's for every rookie, but I think in the right situation, the right context, those guys, especially guys like this that are older, I think they can be solid in a playoff scenario, for Memphis. So, yeah, just something I thought about in terms of like their depth and some of those other players they might rely on in that kind of situation.
And going back to their depth, I think today, or either today or yesterday, they announced that Brandon Clark was out for the year.
That's right. Yeah.
So,
injury.
and that's a big loss for them, because you look at Taylor Jenkins' lineup combinations he's put out all year. He's tried different things. He's tried putting, BC with Jaren Jackson. He's tried going, small, tried going super big. The problem is that he's been looking for, and it comes with also obviously injuries that they haven't had a lot of guys healthy at the same time. We still haven't talked about G.G. Jackson, the third, and Vince Williams Jr., those two guys who were key cogs of last year's team and have kind of fallen behind the pecking order because of the arrival of other guys. You lose Marcus Smart, obviously. But I just think that when it comes down to it, the reason why I have doubts about Memphis is because, one, I don't think that their style is going to work in the playoffs, in terms of you want to run at breakneck speed and you're putting a lot of pressure. And that might be the reason why all these guys were getting hurt all year, because you're emphasizing this pace and you're like on the sideline. And if you've been to Memphis, you can hear him screaming at them to go, 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 go. And a guy like Desmond Bane, who's had pretty rough ankle history, with the injuries and stuff like that, you're asking him to be put in live ball scenarios in terms of side pick and roll, quick actions with Jaren Jackson to get guys open shots, and that can be tough. And I think you put a lot of pressure on yourself to perform consistently when you emphasize pace that much. And I think in the playoffs, whoever the Memphis Grizzlies face, they obviously know what's coming and they know how to stop that 2-3 zone. Like, that's going to force you to slow things down. It's going to force you to move the ball. It's going to force you to beat them from three.
Right.
I don't think they have enough shooters to get that done, number one. And number two, I don't think they have the patience to kind of work through those things in real time. Like, we've seen Taylor Jenkins get frustrated, lose games because of that lack of, composure on the sidelines. And I think everything has been building up. I think they're on the current 3-game losing streak, like currently. They just look inconsistent. And I think it's rough to head into the playoffs with that lack of consistency when you know that on paper you have one of the deepest rosters in the NBA. So I think that's part of the reason why a lot of frustrations are coming out of there, because of what they've been had to endure for the entirety of the season.
For sure. No, that's really important that you pointed that out, that their play style, for sure, it's unconventional, and I think it's nice to see something different played in the NBA today. But you don't run a lot of pick and roll, like you said, and you like to get up and down, and that can hurt you in the playoffs, where you just need to get a good shot in a half court split, which that's totally different. Yeah, so I think we're in agreement on that, Kelly. I mean, this team, I think out of the four we mentioned, we're probably the least confident in this team, even if they do secure a top 2 seed. That they're, I don't think that we're necessarily believe that they're the second best team in the West. Sure. I think that comes down to, man, the Lakers, Rockets, Nuggets. I mean, it's kind of tough to pick out of those three. I think there's a case to be made for all three of them. The Lakers may be the most powerful, the strongest argument, but when it comes to those three teams, man, I think they all have a great case to be number 2. And man, they're all going to be a tough out in the playoffs. That's why I'm so excited to see how the Western Conference shakes out. It's going to be fantastic, man.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
Really good stuff. I think that's about all I have for you, Kelly. I want to thank you again, man, for joining the pod. It was great having you on. Great discussion. Yes, sir. Before I let you go, I want to give you a chance to plug your stuff. Where can the listeners find you if they want to check out some of your articles, follow you on social? Where can they find you online?
Kelly Eco, so KELLYIKO on Twitter or X, Blue Sky. I don't know if y'all still use that. Instagram. I'm there. Subscribe to The Athletic. We have a bunch of great content coming your way. Obviously, follow No Trade Clause because they are one of the best in the business of keeping you up to date about cap and everything associated with that. We got a lot of great playoff coverage coming your way. Personally, I have some good stuff coming in the mix leading up to the playoffs. I have a roundtable discussion with the veterans on the team, on the Rockets. You know, Fred, Jeff, Dylan, Steven Adams, sharing their crazy stories about the playoffs and, you know, just imparting advice to the young guys. Stuff like that coming up. Just some more features in the woodwork. A lot of stuff in the pipeline. So just stay tuned and keep up.
Love to hear it, man. Yeah, this is a great time to follow your stuff because the Rockets they're heading into the playoffs on a high note, and they're going to be a lot of fun to follow. So definitely check that out. Guys, if you want to check out our content, like Kelly said, you can find us online at notradeclause.com, notrade_clause on Twitter X, no trade clause, one word on Instagram. There's a lot more coming your way in terms of clips, graphics, podcasts, you name it. We're going to be following it all as we get into the postseason. So we hope that you guys have enjoyed this episode. And until next time, enjoy these games this season. And we hope to see you in the next installment of NTC. Take care, everybody.